Welcome back to BeFM Drama, where we're presenting part 2 in our 5-part adaptation of A Scandal in Bohemia, a classic Sherlock Holmes story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In this episode, Holmes and Dr. Watson, who have drifted apart for some time, have just been reunited and are preparing to receive a mysterious European visitor who has arrived with urgent business for the detective. Just as Holmes mentioned that our mysterious guest was arriving, I heard the sharp sound of horses' hooves and a grating of wheels against the curbside, followed by a sharp ringing of the bell at the front door. Holmes glanced out the window and whistled.
2 horses by the sound, yes. A nice little carriage and a pair of beauties. Cost 150 guineas each, I'd bet. There's money in this case, Watson, if nothing else.
Holmes, I think that I'd better go.
Stay where you are, Doctor. I'm lost without you. And this promises to be interesting. It would be a pity to miss it.
But your client specified discretion.
Never mind him. I may want your help, and so may he. Here he comes. Sit down in that armchair, Doctor, and give us your best business attitude.
A slow and heavy step, which had been heard upon the stairs and in the passage, paused immediately outside the door. Then there was a loud and authoritative tap.
Come in.
The man who entered could hardly have been less than 6 feet 6 inches in height, with the chest and limbs of a Hercules. His dress was rich, with a richness that, to English eyes, bordered on bad taste. Heavy bands of astrakhan wool were meshed into the sleeves and front of his double-breasted coat, while the deep blue cloak thrown over his shoulders was lined with flame-colored silk and bound at the neck with a brooch made from a single huge jewel. Boots extended halfway up his calves, trimmed at the top with rich brown fur, completing the impression of opulence that his whole appearance suggested. He carried a broad-brimmed hat in his hand and wore a black masquerade mask that covered the upper part of his face. From what we could see of the lower part, he appeared to be a man of strong character, with thick lips and a long, straight chin that gave an impression of resolution and strength. When he spoke, it was in a deep, harsh voice, but with little trace of an accent.
You have my note. I told you that I would call.
Please, take a seat. I'm Sherlock Holmes, and this is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, who occasionally helps me in my cases. Who do I have the honor to address?
You may call me Count von Kram, a Bohemian nobleman. I understand, Mr. Holmes, that this doctor, your friend, is a man of honor and discretion, whom I may trust with a matter of extreme importance. If not, I would much prefer to speak with you alone.
I rose to leave, but Holmes caught me by the wrist and pulled me back down into my chair.
It is both of us or none. You may say anything before this gentleman that you would say to me.
The man shrugged his broad shoulders.
Then I must begin by binding you both to absolute secrecy for 2 years, at the end of which this business will no longer be of importance. At this moment, however, it would not be too much to say that the matter I have come to speak of is of such weight that it may have an influence on European history.
I promise.
And I, too.
You'll excuse the mask. The person who employs me wishes I remain unknown to you, and admit that the name by which I introduced myself is not exactly my own.
I was well aware.
The circumstances are of great delicacy. Every step must be taken to contain what could grow into an immense scandal and seriously compromise one of the ruling families of Europe. To speak plainly, the matter involves the great house of the hereditary kings of Bohemia.
I was also aware of that.
Our visitor glanced with some apparent surprise at the lounging figure of the man who had no doubt been described to him as the most decisive reasoner and most energetic investigator in all of Europe. Holmes sighed and gazed impatiently at his gigantic client.
If your majesty would simply state your case, I should be better able to advise you.
The man leapt from his chair in uncontrollable agitation. Then, with a gesture of desperation, he ripped the mask from his face and threw it on the ground.
You're right. I am the king. Why should I attempt to conceal it?
Why, indeed? Your Majesty had not spoken before I knew I was addressing Wilhelm von Olmstein, Grand Duke of Castle Felstein and hereditary King of Bohemia.
Our strange visitor sat down once again and pressed his hands against his sweating forehead.
You're correct, but surely you understand. You understand that I'm not used to doing such business in my own person. This matter is so delicate that I could not delegate it to another without putting myself at risk. I've come incognito from Prague to consult you, Mr. Holmes.
Then please consult.
The facts are these. Some 5 years ago, during a visit to Warsaw, I made the acquaintance of the well-known adventurer Irene Adler. Her name is no doubt familiar to you.
Kindly look her up in my index, won't you, Doctor?
For many years, Holmes had developed a meticulous system for keeping record of news articles, London gossip, and magazine biographies. It had become so large that it was difficult to name a subject or a person on which he could not at once find some information. In this case, I found Irene Adler's biography sandwiched between that of a well-known rabbi and a staff commander who had written a study of deep-sea fish. I handed the file to Holmes, who was sitting back in his chair with half-closed eyes and an eager, blissful expression on his face.
Let me see. Born in New Jersey in the year 1858. Contralto, prima donna, Imperial Opera of Warsaw. Yes. Retired from operatic stage. Ha! Living in London. Quite so. Your Majesty, I understand, became, shall we say, romantically entangled with this young woman? Wrote her some embarrassing letters and is now deeply desirous to get those letters back?
Precisely so. But how?
Was there a secret marriage?
None.
No legal papers or certificates?
None.
Then I don't understand, Your Majesty. If this Adler person tried to use her letters from you for blackmailing, how could she possibly prove that they were real?
There is my handwriting.
Pooh-pooh, call it forgery.
My private note paper.
Stolen.
My own seal.
Imitated.
My photograph.
Bought.
We're both in the photograph.
Oh dear, that is very bad. Your Majesty has indeed committed an indiscretion.
I was mad. Insane.
You have compromised yourself seriously.
I was only a crown prince then. I was young. I am but 30 now.
The photograph must be recovered.
We have tried and failed.
Your Majesty must pay. It must be bought.
She will not sell it.
Steal it then.
5 attempts have been made. Twice my agents have ransacked her house. Once we diverted her luggage as she traveled. Twice she has been waylaid. There has been no result.
No sign of it?
Absolutely none.
It is quite a pretty little problem.
But a very serious one to me.
Very serious indeed. And what does Irene Adler propose to do with this photograph?
To ruin me.
But how?
I am about to be married.
So I've heard.
To the second daughter of the King of Scandinavia. You may know the strict principles of our family. A single shadow of a doubt about my morality would bring our engagement to an end.
And Irene Adler?
Threatens to send them the photograph. And she will do it. I know that she will. You do not know her, but she has a soul of steel. She has the face of the most beautiful of women and the mind of the most resolute of kings. There are no lengths to which she would not go to prevent me from marrying another woman.
You are sure that she has not sent it yet?
I am sure.
And why?
Because she told me that she would send it on the day when my betrothal was publicly announced. That will be next Monday.
Oh, then we have 3 days left. That's very fortunate. Your Majesty will, of course, be staying in London for the time being.
Certainly. You'll find me at Langham under the name of Count von Kram.
Then I shall drop you a line to let you know how we progress.
Please do so. My anxiety is unbearable.
Then as to money?
You have free reign.
Absolutely.
I'll give you one of the provinces of my kingdom in exchange for the photograph.
That shouldn't be necessary. But for present expenses?
The king took a heavy leather bag from under his cloak and laid it on the table.
There are 300 pounds in gold and 700 in notes.
The sweat broke from my brow at the absurd fortune now sitting on the table between us, but Holmes merely scribbled a receipt on a sheet in his notebook and handed it over to the king, as coolly as a greengrocer doing the same for an order of eggs and milk.
And Irene Adler's address?
Is Brownie Lodge, Serpentine Avenue, St. John's Wood.
One other question. Was the photograph of a large size, a cabinet print, for example?
It was.
Then good night, Your Majesty. I trust we shall soon have some good news for you.
The King of Bohemia stood and walked out of the room. My eyes remained fixed on the leather bag until the sound of the wheels of the royal carriage faded away down the street. Then Holmes turned to me, smiling maniacally.
And good night, Dr. Watson. If you would be kind enough to return here tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, I'd like to chat this little matter over with you.
What plans are Sherlock Holmes running through his mind? How will he pursue the King of Bohemia's case and retrieve these embarrassing photographs and letters before they are released to the public and upset the course of royal European history? Who is this Irene Adler, really? And is she a match for this brilliant detective? Tune in tomorrow to find out in part 3 of our adaptation of A Scandal in Bohemia here on BeFM Drama. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, signing off.